Hello and welcome to the Ladies Best Life podcast. I am joined by a special guest, and I say that all the time, but today it's a different league of special guests. Kyran has literally changed my life in so many different ways, and I know that I'm not the only one. Kyran has helped people across the globe, multitude of different people, to change their lives, to break down limiting beliefs, to live life more on their terms, and to basically become the master of their minds. So Kyran, firstly, thank you. But secondly, welcome.
Hey, Sash. Those intros, whenever clients introduce me like that, I always kind of, I have beaming pride. And then I also kind of this humble side of me is like, kind of like, praise, you know.
Awkward.
Yeah, praise. I'm always dancing the line between extreme humbleness, but then also the ego gets involved and it's like, yeah, I do change lives. Yeah, like, and you got to catch that part. Like, hang on a minute, stop.
All you need to do is watch your testimonials, and I'm pretty sure that ego can just be kind of like rubbed a little bit and made to feel a little bit better.
I actually have I actually picked this up in software sales. I used to keep a folder of every single time a client had signed up 3, 4, 5, 6 months later, and they messaged me and said, this has been the best thing this best piece of software I've ever implemented, or this has been a complete game changer or whatever. I'll then put it in this folder and I'll call it Champions Days. And every single time I got that, I've still got the folder in one of my personal emails. I would go back in there and just remind the impact that I was having. And I've got the same here at TMP. If somebody sends me a WhatsApp or they send me an email or a testimonial, I just put it in this little folder. And that's good for days when you kind of like, oh, get my ass kicked. Why am I doing this? Frustration. When you start dealing with team members, it's like, what's going on? It's like, come back to the thing. Why are you doing the thing?
Love that. So you know a lot about me, my mind, my life, and probably quite a few people who are listening to this as well, depending on, how many coaches will listen to this. And I thought it'd be good to flip it today and to ask you about you. So why are you here doing what you do right now?
Yeah. So for those that are listening and they don't actually know what I do, so I'm the founder of Total Mental Performance. I'm a high performance coach. So I work with CEOs, investors, entrepreneurs outside of TMP and high net worths, as well as scaling fitness entrepreneurs within Total Mental Performance as well. So 2 parts of what I do. Ultimately, I bring 3 coins to the world. My first coin is calm. Calm in the chaos, calm in the being, calm in the soul. Confidence. So confidence comes in various different flavors. What confidence means is one person will mean something different to someone else. But really, it's the confidence to back yourself to win and back yourself to lose and be okay, to ultimately be authentic and say what you truly believe. And finally, it's clarity on who you are, clarity on where it is that you're going, and clarity on why you do what you do. So I do that through one-to-one coaching, and so does my team. So Total Mental Performance, we're now a coaching team of 6, believe it or not. Like it's been moving quick this year. And we've worked with hundreds of clients. It's our 3rd birthday in January, and we've delivered over 3,000 one-to-one hours throughout that journey, which is very cool. Why do I do what I do? So a little bit of background. So I spent 8 years as a boxer at a competitive level, managed to make the England team, managed to fight in lots of different countries. I then meant to spend 6 years in software sales. So that was selling software into Europe, selling software into the US. And it was all born on the feeling of not being good enough, the feeling of not being worthy, the fear of failure, the fear of what if I'm not a success. And when you couple that, I believe children pick in their childhood with go one of 2 ways. They get a message where they're not enough, they're not worthy, and they go, yeah, you're right. And then they give up and they just accept their lot. Then there's the other type of child, which is the type of child that we all coach here at TMP, which is the ambitious ones, the ones that give you the double middle finger and say, fuck you, I'm going to prove you wrong, which is amazing because it leads to a lot of hard work. It leads to a lot of positive outcomes early. But then what happens is self-sabotage leaks in. And for me, I had self-sabotage in boxing. So I got to a point where I had an eating disorder, binge eating disorder specifically. I got so anxious, I was struggling even to just leave the house. I tried to take my own life. I lost my place on the England team. I had a nutrition startup, so it was an app for boxers to help boxers lose weight for their fights. That put me. We lost 30 grand on that business, and I ended up putting myself in £15,000 of debt. My girlfriend at the time left me. It just all fell apart. I tried to take my own life. I just thought it's done now. It's over. Almost like when you see in the movies of the stock markets crashing in the 80s, and then people trying to jump off a building. That's what it felt like. It felt like everything was done. It was over. It took me a long time to sort of rebuild and repack. And I worked with a lady called Hazel Gale, former kickboxing world champion, boxing British champion. She's now a technology entrepreneur. She was a therapist and performance coach for athletes and business owners. And she changed my life. I couldn't afford to work with her. She worked with me for free and then just said, pay me what you can afford. Changed my life. I'd be dead without Hazel. And what I learned on that journey, well, actually after the boxing, I got better. And then I went back into software sales. And then my ego got involved. Because at one point when I went back into software sales, after all of that had gone wrong, I was living on a sofa on a council estate in South London with all the debt. And I was going into the office 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. selling into Europe, and then 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. I was then selling into the States, and then 8 p.m. till about 8:30 till about 10. I was then boxing or running or in the gym, and then I'd be getting home and doing that all again. But the sales part was more about ego. The sales part was more about ego. And that was less of a mental health play. That was more of an existential play. And I got to the point where, I was in a senior role. I was getting paid great money. I had the central London apartment. I had the, air quotes, trophy wife. Like she was amazing, amazing woman. I did everything ticked off, and I was miserable. I was like, fuck. Now what? Now what am I going to do? And what I learned is the ambitious mind is a powerful mind, but it's also a little bit like, I'm going to go with a nuclear reactor. So if you think about nuclear energy, we can produce a lot of electricity and a lot of energy that can power towns, that can power buildings, it can actually power weapons, When you actually use it properly, it's a powerful, powerful resource. But if you don't look after nuclear energy properly, it can explode. It can cause a lot of damage. It can kill people. It can create mutations. And ambition's a little bit like that. And that's how I see it. So what I realized was it was my ambition and my insecurity and not feeling enough that led to me to constantly be running in these cycles, crashing, burning, not being happy, not being well. And it was only as I was coming out of that phase, I started to realize, okay, there's more to it than that. So I restudied as a cognitive therapist, NLP practitioner, peak performance coach, and it was through there I just started coaching people for free, and I realized I just fucking loved it. And I attract high performers, A players, ambitious minds that want to go and do cool shit. And it really just grew from there. So that's the context. So why do I do what I do? Well, it was having seen myself fail so many times because my inability to manage my own being, my inability to manage my emotions, my inability to process anxiousness and overwhelm and fear and stress that led to a lot of self-sabotage. And I don't want other ambitious minds to go to the extremes that I did. And then on the flip side, I'm fascinated by how can a human, this might sound a bit existential, but how can we push the boundaries of the model of what a human being is? So think about that for a minute. How can we push the model of what a human being actually is? Because we have all these beliefs as to what a human being is. And we have all these ideas as to what a successful, air quotes, human being is. We have our ideas about what a driven, compassionate, loving human being is. But I'm fascinated by performance, right? And that comes from my background in the boxing and in the sales. How can we have humans performing in a way that's fulfilling? How can we have human beings that love what they do and they still get incredible results? How can we operate in a world of abundance? That, for me, because there's all the negative stuff, how can we minimize that? But how can we maximize abundance, clarity, calm? How can we actually maximize the ability to handle the storms that come in? And I could go off for about another 20, 30, 40 minutes on these topics, but that's essentially why I do what I do. I don't want people to fall into the trap of what I fell into. But at the same time, I also want to understand what's possible. how can we do this? What can be achieved, if that makes sense?
How can we?
Great question. Well, if you look at the red and the blue on TMP, red equals protection, blue equals growth, right? So for me, there's always an element of protection and scarcity that we need to work on. There'll be moments in life where that's a lot less, and there'll be moments where it comes up more, and it comes up less, it comes up more. So part of that is almost just like in weight loss and your fitness training. You know, sometimes you're going to gain a little bit of fat, sometimes you're going to be a little bit leaner, sometimes you get a bit bigger, and it's navigating those expansions and those contractions. So part of it is looking at a human being and going, right, what is it that's weighing them down? Where are they burning up energy? Where are they unconsciously spending emotion? Because that's what emotion is, energy in motion. You're spending that energy. How can we shave off perhaps some limiting beliefs, or shave off a little bit of trauma, whether that's a capital T or a little t, doesn't matter. That means that they can have more energy to go and get more shit done. The second part is then looking at more of the practical side. Because in the world of mindset and mental performance coaching, you've got the far left, ultra spiritual, and I can do spiritual. I can understand some of that stuff, but what I can't do is sort of manifestation, meditation, and no one's actually doing any fucking work. Can't do that, you know. So there's like this sort of spiritual side. Then you got the opposite side, which is like ultra practical, which is just, you know, ice baths in the morning, and make sure that you're writing stuff down, and make sure that you're doing your breath work, and make sure that you're doing, and it's just all practical based. And then you kind of got more of the business mentor and coaching side, which is very much more on the business bit. I sit in between. I believe that all of it has its various different uses, and it's not down to me, it's down to the client. So on that side of things, it's like, okay, well, does this human being actually have meaning and purpose? Do they enjoy what it is that they do? Do they get fulfillment? Do they have challenge? Do they have novelty? And it's looking through that individual's needs, because everybody's needs are all completely different. And then it's going, right, how can we tick those needs in a way which is in line with their values? And ultimately, they're building a future that's worth suffering for, because we're all going to suffer. Like, we don't get a choice. You're going to suffer. Even if you have the most loving relationship in the world, you're going to suffer within that relationship. Even if you have children, God, they're going to get sick. You're going to be scared. You're going to be worried if they're going to come unwell. Okay, you're going to scale a big business. Great. Well, guess what? You're going to have to do with human beings. Human beings are inconsistent, and they are human, and they are going to get on your tits, and they're going to get on your nerves. So you're going to suffer. So you might as well work towards something worth suffering for versus letting the world happen to you, if that makes sense. And those are the conversations I love having. More existential, oh, okay, how can we look at the world, versus, you know, do this thing, do this thing, do this thing, or the opposite of just manifest, baby, it's coming. You know, I don't cut it with that either, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a great way to explain it. And I've got two questions off the back of that. So you said about kind of you, when you were in London, you had it all, but then you kind of was like, well, what next? Like, I'm still not happy. So if someone's listening to this and they're in a position where they're striving for it all, they've got the car, they've got the beautiful house, they've got the fit partner, they've got a banging body, they've got it all, but they're fucking miserable. How did you have the awareness, or how can they have the awareness, or that thing that's going to help them to wake up and pivot?
Good question. How did I have the awareness? To be honest, I didn't. I was just suffering. I was just, God. I look back at pictures of me, and well, you know what's funny, actually? I'm recording this podcast in a white shirt. I've taken back shirts. I stopped wearing shirts after I left the corporate world, because I felt like, double middle finger, fuck you, I've had enough. I'm not doing this anymore. And I just started wearing t-shirts. That was my act of rebellion. But what I forgot was I love wearing shirts. I love wearing white shirts. I love them. I love that look. I love that, how I feel when I wear that. So I've taken those back. But when I look back in those pictures, I'm wearing the same shirts as I'm wearing today. Yet you can just see behind my eyes, he's not there. He's not in. And it's actually quite sad. So I didn't have the awareness. I didn't have that awareness. Hazel had that awareness. She was kind of tapping on the top of my head, my coach at the time. She's like, come on, like, this isn't for you. But I wasn't willing to accept that. I was also in a place of stubbornness. So I'm quite stubborn, and that can be a good thing. But the problem with stubbornness is you can lead to unnecessary suffering. So instead of me just going, you know what, I'm going to wipe my hands of the whole affair, and I've made enough money to not have to work, because I did. I took at one point I took like a year out to just not do anything. I had enough cash to not work, so I was like, I'm going to keep doing my coaching for free, and keep studying my therapy, and just enjoy that and whatever. But I never had that awareness. The notion of peace behind overachievement was real for me. The more I achieve, the more I'll be loved. The more I achieve, the more I'll be accepted. It was never the case. I just turned into an arrogant prick. So I never really had it. I kind of had to get to that point where, I had a breakdown of a relationship. I had a breakdown of a career. I just wasn't enjoying it. Just going through the motions. I was just sort of trudging myself up the Northern Line every single morning, hating myself, thinking, I hate this. Why am I doing this? It just wasn't for me. So this is going to sound really left field, and I don't say that anyone has to do this, but me and Dan and my team, we booked a trip to Peru, and we did an ayahuasca ceremony, and that ayahuasca ceremony completely changed my life. And this is going to sound really weird. No, if people are wondering what on earth is ayahuasca, the chemical inside it is DMT, and it's something that you drink and you have a spiritual experience. It's a psychedelic. And in that moment, we went up into the mountains into Peru. Absolutely fucking beautiful place. No light pollution. So you are peering into the galaxy. We're up in the mountains. All of our phones are left in these safes. So we've got 5 days of no communication. On site, they have a shaman, who's the person that runs an ayahuasca ceremony. They had what else did they have? They had a shaman. They had a doctor, psychiatrist, nursing team, Indian priest, all on site. And I had these ceremonies, and it just became clear. It wasn't I was on the wrong path. And I won't go into the details of the ceremonies, but one of them, it was like a coming of age ceremony. And I just remember coming out of that, and I realized I was still stuck in being a boy, and I came out a man. That's going to sound quite intense for a lot of people. Going, what on earth is this guy on about? But it was after that experience, I just realized that we're a speck of dust amongst the universe, and we take ourselves so seriously, but we'll all be dead soon, and no one's going to remember us. None of us can barely remember the bloody Queen when she passed away. So why is anyone going to remember us now? Like, let's be honest, the greatest monarch in the world, how often do you think of her? You don't, So that really put a lot into perspective for me. And I realized that my model of achievement and fulfillment wasn't going to work anymore. So I come back, and I still stayed in sales, and it just seemed even more pointless. It seemed more pointless than ever. And everything, I had the same stimulus around me, but there was such internal change. I was just like, I don't want to do this anymore. My relationship at the time didn't want to do this anymore. I love the apartment. I missed that apartment. It was in an old, it was in the top floor of a Victorian building that had been there for over 100 years in St. George's Road. I loved it. So I missed that. But all of it wasn't right. And I just kind of realized this isn't the path for me. And I'd already been doing my studies. I'd already been doing my training. And I just had this moment where I was like, this is what I want to do. And that was it. So that realization it didn't come to me in just a moment. It came to me over a period of time. And I think if I had learned that earlier, I would have achieved more in a more fulfilling way much earlier. But then also, people have got to make their own mistakes. Like, I say this with love, Sash. There's been a couple of times where I've held up a mirror and I've said, hey, Sash, just be aware, you don't walk into this. And you said, no, I'll be fine. And we've both known what you're walking into. And I've said, in my head internally, she's got to go make the mistake. You've met one of my mentors, Ron. The amount of times Ron has said, yeah, I told you, and you had to go make the mistake to learn a lesson. I was like, yep, move on. Let's go. Come on in. So it wasn't that. But if you're listening to this and you're going, oh, that really resonates. You don't have to fly to Peru to go and get these realizations. I have a team that's built around helping ambitious minds that want to achieve. I have a team and a process built specifically to help you realize what you think you wanted perhaps isn't what you want. And when we become so focused on the outcome, and the destination versus the actual journey, we get stuck. We actually aren't giving ourselves the time and the energy to appreciate what we're doing. Because as soon as you hit the one goal, then you're on to the next one, you're on to the next one, you're on to the next one, and you never feel fulfilled. And years later, you're like, oh, still don't feel good enough. So it's having the balance and having the right people around you to hold up those mirrors and go, you sure this is the path? And then taking action on that, if that makes sense. Long-winded explanation, but hopefully that gives you some context as to how that happened.
Oh man, I could literally just listen to you all day. And it's so good hearing you speak so honestly about it and also give people a realistic kind of solution. But I think if I was listening to this and I was stuck on the hedonic treadmill, chasing numbers in business or, status or whatever, and I was unhappy, that could literally just be the seed that needs to be planted today of, oh, fuck, like this doesn't need to be this way. It can be different. And in regards to you saying about holding up mirrors, to me, that's what I love about having you as my coach / mentor, because people around you, so I'm not really surrounded by people who inspire me in regards to a way of living my life. I am surrounded by people who I've known for a very long time and I love them dearly. But having you in my corner helps me to realize where I'm wanting to go and also where I'm tripping up. And obviously we've both found out, and I think it's the same for the majority of people, I can't be told what to do. I have to fuck up. I have to make those mistakes. And then I come back to you and go, okay, that kind of hurt a little bit, but hey, and I think I'm okay with that. I'm okay with making mistakes. I'm okay with fucking up.
Well, that's mentoring and coaching. It's so there was a couple of times with Ron. So Ron, for context, Ron, I love Ron. You met Ron at the TMP event in London. Great guy. He just completely changed my life. I pitched him for 50 grand for the app that didn't work out, and within 5 minutes he went, here's why that's not going to work. Here's your pivot. You're not getting my money. Out you get. Boom, done. Fuck. Oh, ouch. I remember coming out, looking at my he's now one of my best mates, my business partner at the time, Luke, in the eyes, and we went, he's right. He went, yeah, we shut the business like the next day. Done. Out. Over. Game over. That was that, like, he was completely right. And he has, where I've been mentored by him for about 8 years now. He's world class at what he does. His background, so he owns a company called Tech Ventures London. So he calls himself a poor man's Dragon's Den. He invests in technology companies that are quite early on, and he mentors them. Before that, he led over 200 people in a sales function in a company called Rackspace, which is one of the biggest hosting and support services in the world. And then before that, he owned gyms and sold gyms, and that's something that he did. And he has seen me fail so many times. He has backed me, even when he told me not to do something, and I went and did it anyway. And he went, well, back to the drawing board, son. Off we go. He's completely changed my life. And I do think a lot of the mentoring and the coaching acumen I've picked up has just been through having him in my corner for years and years and years, holding up that mirror, asking me the questions, passing on the knowledge, passing on the wisdom. And you have to have somebody that has unwavering faith in you. When we talk, if you were to listen to some of our calls, Ash, is ruthless, but ruthlessly loving. And we're always attacking the problem, not the person. So, for example, let's say I've dropped the ball on something. He'll tell me straight, that's not good enough. If you want to operate at that level, that's not good enough. But listen to his language. That behavior is not good enough. Not that I'm not good enough, the behavior is not good enough. So because we have so much trust in the emotional bank account, we can give each other very harsh and direct feedback. One was the TMP event. He said, looking at the numbers, mate, don't think it's a good idea. Don't think it's a good idea at all. And I said, okay, well, I get that. I can understand why you'd think that, but my instincts suggest otherwise. Next thing you know, we pulled off an event 2 times bigger. We managed to generate a 5 times return on what we invested in that event, just in cash taken. But then the ripple effect and the network effect, we reached hundreds of thousands of people through everybody that attended, shared our stuff, and did all of that. And then he went, yeah, fair enough. Well done. you had your instincts, you push back, and off we went. And you need those people that will back you and they'll support you. They'll watch you fall flat on your face, eat shit, and then go, unlucky, where are we going next? Come on, let's go. And you need that. So I'm very fortunate to have had really good tutorage, very, very good tutorage. And I think that's why I'm able to get the results I've been able to get. Has just been years and years and years of finding the right people, trusting my instincts and going, that person can teach me something. I need to go and learn. Just like the coach I've just hired for me.
Love it. Earlier, you mentioned that each of us have different needs. And this is something that I only really got introduced to probably when I was working with a therapist before I started working with you. And not only did he say, who are you? And I was like, I'm Sasha, I'm a PT, my mum's Janet. And he was like, no, who are you? And I was like, what the fuck? Like, I'm Sasha, I've just told you. But he also helped me understand about needs. And when he was saying needs, I instantly went to, is it Maslow's? Where no, I can't remember which, like
Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Is it? Yeah. So you need a roof over your head, you need food. Is that Maslow?
That's Maslow's, yeah.
And then I was like, but he wanted to go further than that. So when you say that we've all got different needs, can you help people who are like, what are you going on about? Like, I've got food, I've got a warm house. What do you mean by that?
So people have different needs in different areas. So for example, let's look at the hunter-farmer model, as we've been doing some of your ADHD training this year. So I'm an ADHDer. We suspect Sash is too. ADHD is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. I don't think it's a disorder. I think that people are just wired differently. But there's a model by Hart Foreman, Thormann. If you search hunter-farmer theory, that's his theory. And it really resonates with me, and it resonates with a lot of our clients. So neurotypical people that want to, that they're just wired normally. They can go to school and sit down and concentrate, and they can go to work and they can function, and they're all good in that area. Well, the model is their neurochemistry is more towards agriculture, the industrial complex, and farming. So human beings didn't always do what we do. It was only a few hundred years ago that we actually decided, let's start farming. Let's actually start, instead of going out hunting, we'll bring all the animals to us. Let's start growing crops. Let's start building factories. Everybody's going to stay in the same place. Whereas human beings over thousands of years have been nomadic tribes. They've been going out and hunting. And that's where we look at neurodiverse minds versus neurotypical minds. Neurotypical minds typically tend to be more farmer type. So for them, somebody that's a farmer type, what are the needs for a farmer? Consistency, patience, safety, security. They build all their fences. They build all the defenses around where they are. So those types of individuals are going to have a much lower tolerance to risk. My ex, she was an actuary. So actuaries analyze data to minimize risk. You have to study for 7 years in order to go and do that. It's a very specialist job. Total farmer. Hunters, on the other hand, they need new novelty. They need new stimulus. They need new shit to keep them engaged. That's just what they need. So when you look at that and you think about a hunter needs new stimulus. They need to be able to focus for a long period of time. And then they need to chill and relax and calm down. And then they need to go on the next hunt and go on the next chase. And they need to be moving around. They need to be changing things up. Otherwise, they're going to get bored. So if we use the hunter-farmer model, you can see the needs for those two types of individuals are very, very different. One needs a need for novelty, new stimulus, new people, new things to re-engage them. And then the farmer needs consistency. They need safety. They need security. They need patience. So that's a performance model that I've seen whenever I'm coaching neurodiverse people. What does that play out for in people? Well, some people have intellectual needs. They need to go and study something. They need to learn something. They need to be on some sort of course or whatever. Other people have creative needs. So that might be expressing art. That might be building a business. For me, my art is my business. The brand is a piece of art for me. Total Men's Performance is a piece of art. And it's also a bit of a science. How can I generate more results at scale in the way that we do it? So that's my type of intellectual creative expression. I need to be able to do that. You put me in the same role doing the same thing, I'll do it for about a month, and then I'm like, done, bored, can't do it. So we all have various different ones. Same in relationships. Some of us value high energy, novelty, stimulus. Some of us value safety, security, like keeping things in the same place. We all travel at different speeds. So it's understanding what your unique needs are. So for me, I have a unique, it might not be unique, but it's a need of work. I love working and I love working hard. And I love being creative and I love doing what I do. I also have a need where I need to exercise near enough every day in order to manage my ADHD. Otherwise, things can get a little bit out of control. If I don't do those things, if I don't exercise and train how I need to, then I become more anxious, I become more overwhelmed, I become more stuck, I become more stressed. So we all have various different ones. And it's understanding, okay, well, what are my specific needs? How do I get them met in a healthy way that I can do consistently? And they'll evolve over time too.
And that actually links to the first part of what I said about with the therapist from before working with you. Like, who are you? So many people, I think, just slot into imitations of people around them and don't really go, what do I like? What do I need? What do I want? You know, how do I like to be spoken to? And I think it's fascinating when you start to explore that.
People get quite triggered by that question. And it's a very triggering question. I kind of go questionception on that one. So when somebody says, who are you? And I say, okay, what outcomes do you want from that question? So what do you want to know? Do you want to know my bullet points? Founder, mental performance coach, boxer, Arsenal fanatic. Do you want to know how I think and feel? Like, what do you want? Because we all put these labels. Humans love to put people in boxes. They love to put people in labels, and it helps us feel safe. That person is this a coach. This person is like people love throwing the word CEO around. I'm a CEO. Yeah, I'm a CEO. I got a VA and I'm a CEO. Like, you know, everybody loves throwing these labels around, but like at the end of the day, it's having clarity on you. I find a way to hack that is kind of look at your values, like what's important to you. So, who am I? Well, I love inspiring change in others. I love, and that's what I do. All of my energy is about how can we help somebody move through their suffering in a more effective way, and how can we help them get more shit done in a way that's meaningful and fulfilling. That's what I'm about, whether that's personally or whether that's professionally. And without falling into the trap of ego, I am the founder of Total Mental Performance. I coach all the big dogs. Do I really? Define a big dog, you know, like we can all fall into that trap. Or, oh, I live in this place, or I have these things, thus I am this and this and this and this. One thing I do deeply identify is as an Arsenal fan. I'm obsessive. I'm obsessive. Every single game, I know exactly who's playing. I know where all the players are from. I know the strategies. I love that club inside out. So you could say, who am I? I'd go into that part, you know. And again, this is what I said earlier about stretching the model of what human can be. It's like, okay, well, am I any of these things, or am I inherently none of these? And I've just absorbed all of these through culture, whether that's through desire, whether that's through acceptance. And then this is where we go off into the existential part, where we're peering into the universe, going, what is the meaning of life? So I'm going to put a pin in that before we roll into there. Unless you want to go in there, I can play in there if you want.
Go on then, let's go.
Well, let me ask you before I give you my answer. What do you think the meaning of life is?
To become who you truly are.
If you truly were who you thought you were, how would you know?
I think you'd feel that sense of fulfillment and alignment.
I like that. I like that. That's nice. Mine's a little bit more morbid. Mine is life is meaningless and everything dies. But there is a but. There's no point in believing in fuck all, so you might as well pick something that's meaningful enough for you to pursue. I was first introduced to that idea by Mark Manson in The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. Great book, love that book. And he actually draws a lot from Buddhism and a lot from suffering, and I love it. I absolutely love it, because look, if you listen to this podcast, chances are you live in a world of abundance. Like, we are so fucking fortunate to be where we are. There is so much starvation and chaos and destruction and war and famine and dark things happening all over the earth. We've got no idea that this is going on. We either choose to turn a blind eye, or we're just not exposed to that. So all of our problems are problems of abundance. They're problems of thinking. They are problems of us being stuck in our own heads. So for me, the meaning of life is, how can I find a mission that's meaningful enough for me to suffer and kind of enjoy the suffering, and kind of go into suffering, go, yeah, you know what, this is worth suffering for. That for me is the pursuit, and that's going to evolve and change. So what I'm up to these days is going to be very different. You know, I want to be a father, not just a dad, but a father. In my view, there's a big difference between the two. I want that. I want to be able to grow TMP and change as many lives as I can. And as we grow and scale, I want to give back more to charity and go and build things in ways in which I can help others and go into that altruistic side. You know, I want to do those things. That excites me. That's a future that's worth suffering for. As a leader, you know, like, how can I show up for a leader? How can I create an environment where everybody wants to come to work? How can I create an environment where everybody enjoys what they do? How can I do that? So those are all pursuits that are worth suffering for. So if I take the game too seriously, I go back and I go, well, life is meaningless and everything dies, and I'm taking the game a little bit too seriously. And that's like an existential release valve. Like, oh yeah, I forgot. I started taking this too seriously. We'll all be dead soon. Cool. Calm down. Go back to work, if that makes sense. That's how I look at the meaning of life at this phase. That might change, but that's how I see it for now.
Incredible. And again, just helps to ground you by going, well, you know, we're going to be dead soon, so you may as well just fucking enjoy it and get out your own way and out your own head. So where you were before, so when you were in London and you had all the things and you made this pivot, so do you now feel that you consistently live with the fulfillment that you knew or maybe you didn't know you needed, but you knew you needed after you did the ayahuasca retreat?
So I've kind of misunderstood the question. Can you ask it again?
Yeah. Do you consistently live with the fulfillment that you realize you needed from the ayahuasca retreat?
At this period of my life, yes, absolutely. Now, it's not always going to be like this. And I'm aware that I'm going through a period of time where I'm very fortunate, and I'm going through a period of time where I have a lot of alignment, a lot of fulfillment. And my suffering at the moment is pretty fucking good. I was journaling on this on my King Day yesterday. I don't know if you saw all my stories, but there's this coffee shop, and inside it's got a rare bookshop above it. And it's like got these platforms, and in the top above the platform, it's then got this little corner for like a little reading corner that's tucked away, and you've got to climb up a little ladder to get up there. And I'm sort of sat up there, you know, I'm sort of just having a coffee and I'm reading and I'm journaling, and I'm like, you know, I reached a period. Matt McConaughey puts it perfectly. You're going to go through periods of life where you have green lights, yellow lights, and red lights. And at the minute, I'm going through a period of green lights, and I'm very fortunate, and touch wood, that continue. But at the same time, if you have meaningful enough stuff going on, like, I do think you can have moments of green lights. But if your dad dies or your mum dies, or, you know, you go through a breakup or a business fails, then you're going to go through red lights. I'm very aware I'm not just going to live in these green lights for the rest of my existence. And that's just not realistic. And Matt McConaughey explains that really well in his book. And you see it through his life stories, where he goes through moments where he's got green lights, everything's accelerating, doors are opening, he's getting invited to go to places that leads to more momentum, leads to more growth. And then he has moments where he hits red lights. He was known as the romantic comedy guy for a lot of the films that he was in. When he said, nope, I want to do dramas. He didn't get nothing for a couple of years, red lights. every time, but then they'd offer him loads of money. Here's $20 million for another romantic comedy. And he'd say, no. And he's like, oh, fucking hell. Like, what am I going to do? Like, what about this? What about that? He said, no. And he had all this doubt. He was in these red lights. And then he got a couple of offers for some dramas. Some yellow lights were coming in. And then he did, I can't remember what the film was, did a big film. Boom. Went back to green lights. So I would love to live in love and light and abundance all the time, but that's just not realistic. You know, life's going to get in the way, suffering's going to happen. But total mental performance is the ability to perform regardless of how you feel and regardless of your circumstance. Even if you get completely wiped out, there's going to be moments where, you know, I'm going to be brought to my knees in suffering and grief and anguish, because that's part of the human experience. And we'll find out what I'm really made of when those things happen. And so I have a lot of fulfillment and I have a lot of alignment. You know, I do have days where I'm tired, I'm stressed, and I'm annoyed and I'm frustrated. And I think, fucking hell, I have moments where I think, you know what? I'm just going to live in a cave, or I'm just going to go on a 6-month retreat to India. And I'm going to go sit with some gurus and see if they've got anything to teach me. And I have those moments like that, but they pass, and they pass a lot more quickly because I have clarity on where I'm going. I have clarity on why I do what I do. And this is an underrated thing, but it's finding joy in the small bits. Like the conversation we're having now, I find joy in. It's going to sound a bit weird because they're quite intense conversations, but when I'm having a one-to-one and I can see a client making a deep emotional breakthrough upon which themselves and their reality is never going to be the same again, whilst it's very hard for that individual in that moment, I get deep fulfillment in that. That lights me up. When I'm getting to be creative, okay, where are we going to take the brand now? How are we going to build another event that's going to change everybody's world? How are we going to do this? These things are light me up. So even if you're going through hell, even if you're going through inherent suffering, if you can find meaning in the small little things. So even when I was going through sales and I was in that moment where I was unhappy and I didn't want to be here and I really hated all of that, I joined a kickboxing class. And for 2 hours a week, I had joy. And I found joy, even if it was only for 2 hours in that, just kicking some pads and learning something new. And then there was a full English. I like an old greasy spoon. There's like a full English place, Kennington Calf. Shout out to Kennington Calf in South London. I'd go there on a Saturday. And I'd just have my breakfast and my tea. And I'd find joy in just a breakfast. And it's finding those little moments if you are stuck, if you are feeling lost and unfulfilled, finding those little moments of joy, because they're all around us. Having a coffee, sitting there with a book, like closing your eyes and listening to something, going for a walk, and finding those little things that can then compound into others. So I appreciate that was a bit of a speech, but that's kind of what I took from that question, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that was brilliant. If you've got people who are wanting to go down a particular journey, but they are facing red light after red light after red light, and they're going, is this a sign from the universe that actually I need to change what I want? What words of wisdom do you have for them?
When the student is ready, the teacher appears. So think about it. We met at the Joe's event, right? Mm-hmm. And you were ready, and I just appeared. You know, there was lots of people in that room where it was interesting. There's a couple of people in that room that met me that day and they didn't join. And then months later, they eventually joined and I appeared then. So I think if you're stuck in red light, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. It becomes clear, okay, there's another, that this person can help me. Another thing is risk. You're always going to try and convince yourself to not do it. I've just invested $47,000 in a one-to-one program that's the same length as my program. It's so 10 one-to-ones over 18 weeks, except our calls here at TMP are typically 60 to 90 minutes. These calls are 30 minutes. I don't get access to any course or anything. And my brain is like, do you need to invest that much? Like, is that really a good idea? Like, do you want to do that? And then you got to look at, okay, can I afford the absolute downside? Now, I've earned the right to be able to afford the absolute downside. If this is a complete waste of money and time, I can afford that. So if you can afford the absolute downside, you have nothing to lose. Like, think about it. If you can afford the absolute downside, you have nothing to lose. So on that side of things, I read his book. Rich's book. I read it, The Prosperous Coach. Give it a listen. Read one of the best books I've ever read on coaching and creating high value clients. Read that 3 years ago. Loved it. Followed his podcast ever since. He mentored one of my mentors. One of my mentors kept pointing me back up to him, and he operates at a league and a level that makes me and my clients look tiny and really small, and right, like on a completely different league. He's dealing in Hollywood. He's dealing in politics, special forces, top 7, 8, 9-figure entrepreneurs. You know, he's got his own charity. He's building schools over in Africa. Like, he's doing stuff that's on a completely different league, a completely different level. So if I want to get there, the thinking and feeling that got me here is not going to be the thinking and feeling that's going to get me there. So I'd probably use those two frames. One, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. So if you've been following Sash for a while, you've been following me for a while, if you're a coach or an entrepreneur and you're thinking, yeah, I need to do some work on that side, maybe the teacher's just appeared for you. And then the second part is, okay, well, can you afford the absolute downside? If it all goes terribly wrong, can you afford that to happen? If the answer is no, don't do it. If the answer is yes, then maybe you don't have as much to lose as you think. And it only takes one person. I know this for me. I've met somebody and there's been a complete pivot and my whole life has changed. And I meet somebody else and then that pivot changes. So that's what I would say to anyone listening to this. And they're like, oh, do I? Don't I?
Okay. Before we wrap up, what would Kyran at his, you could say lowest, or a moment that really stands out in your mind, be thinking if he was kind of like looking at you right now and listening to you speak?
He wouldn't recognize him. He that kind of brings up quite a bit of emotion, Sash, that question. The instant moment I thought about was driving my car down the motorway and wanting to crash the car. I didn't want to be here anymore. And this last minute moment, I just heard, not now, not today. It like whispered in my ear. I don't know what that was. And then I just didn't. And I pulled into a car park and then I bought loads of pick and mix sweets and I was binging until I threw up. And then my mum picked me up. It was bad. I didn't leave the house for 2 weeks after that. So instantly in that moment, when you asked me that question, I went and sat in the seat of the car, wearing the white shirt I'm wearing, looked at him, and just saw this sort of broken, lost soul. And I don't think he'd have believed it was possible. Because in that moment, that if you were talking about rock bottom moment, that was my rock bottom moment. I was that close to not being here. He wouldn't believe that this was possible. Because in that moment, you believe nothing's possible. You believe the only way out of the pain and suffering is ending it all. And that ties back into, that might sound quite extreme, but I don't want other ambitious minds to go there. No way. That's why, you can only take a client as deep as you've gone yourself. That's why I can see the levels and I can help people not hit that depth before they get there. So I just wouldn't believe it was possible. I'd be believing it was a dream. It was an illusion in that moment. I've always had lots of self-belief. I've always had an inner drive since I was a kid. I've always known and I had a confidence I was going to do well in whatever field that I did. Not football. I was very bad at football. But, any of the things that I had an affinity to, I believed I could do well. But in that moment, I just didn't believe. I didn't believe anything. And that was the bit where I kind of, as I put myself in that car in that moment when you asked the question, I was like, no, I didn't believe this was possible. But before that, even maybe 2 months before that, I'd have had a sliver. I'd have had my moment. Yeah, I still believe that. And since I was a kid, I've always had a deep-rooted belief that deep down I'll find a way. I've had moments where I've wavered from that, but it always comes back. So I would probably say, that's good for you, pal, but that's not the direction I'm on, is probably what I would say. And that was absolute hopelessness in that moment.
Okay. It's interesting hearing you talk about that and be able to take yourself back to that point in such depth and clarity. So thank you for sharing that. I do appreciate it. So where can people find out more about you? Because we could carry on chatting for hours, but I'm sure we've both got places to be. So where can people find out more about you? Where can they connect with you?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram at Total Mental Performance. So that's both me and the company Instagram. So you can learn a little bit more about TMP and what we do. In terms of if you want to hear more conversations like this, actually head to Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Sasha's actually been on the TMP podcast. She shares a lot of her story. But I'm having conversations. To be honest, Sash, this has probably been one of the ones where I actually get to talk on a lot more depth. And maybe I need to do a bit more guest. I don't guest a lot on podcasts, usually because of diaries and schedules and whatever. But I'm having. If you like these conversations, then I'm having conversations like this on the TMP podcast too. And that's it. If you've heard anything on this podcast that's resonated, or you've got a question, like just message me. You can message me on @TotalMentalPerformance on Instagram, or you can drop me an email, KLO, so Kilo Lima Oscar @totalmentalperformance.com. Just reference this podcast, and I'll hit your reply on there.
Incredible. Kyran, thank you ever so much for being here with us today. I massively appreciate that.
My pleasure. Infinite love.